welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm your host, Jessikah, and I'm really happy to be welcoming back one of my favorite authors. It's become sort of like a yearly thing now that we chat about your books, and I want to welcome you back, Ashley Winstead. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Thank you so much, Jessica. I love coming to chat with you about my books every year. This is just the absolute best. Thank you for having me back.
Well, thank you for coming, and I want to let you know that This Book Will Bury Me was like a real compelling read. I got through it real quick, which is not a bad thing. It was just I really wanted to know what would happen next. It was gripping, it was interesting, but it was also a really strangely accurate, I thought, portrayal of what I like to call grief malaise. You know, after you lose somebody and your brain is searching for some sort of connection, I just want to commend you on how well done that was, even though it comes from a place of experience.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And thank you. Like that, I think that is the highest compliment to just know that a reader and just thinks that I've gotten that part down because that was deeply important to me, if not the most important part to me. I wrote this book in the wake of my father's passing, and I was really determined to be as honest as I could be and about putting things on the page that a lot of times people don't talk about with grief. Like, I love the phrase grief malaise. That's just so perfect. I might have to steal that and I'll credit you wherever I use it. But just so that and post grief, just the body horror sometimes the just all the parts of struggling with losing someone that you know sometimes you don't even talk about with other people who are in the same position you are. So for some
Yeah.
masochistic reason I decided to put that on the page for the entire world to read, but
It was
that's it. Yeah.
well done. It was very
Thank you.
well done. And so this is the story, first of all, as you might know if you've read the back of the book or if this is your first time coming to this, this is one of Ashley's darker stories. You go between fluffy romance and the darkest of the dark. And I love it. And this one is a lot about amateur sleuthing in the true crime community, which is a thing, but what it's about is that, first of all, the main character's name is Janeway Sharp, which I love because
Thank you.
I am a Voyager fan. I do not care who wants to say whatever. Love Voyager, adore
Yes.
it, and that made me really happy. And Jane, she loses her father very quickly, and she's a college student, and it all comes as a shock to her. Obviously, her father was the one who was the big Star Trek fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gave her her name, Janeway, after what he thought was the world's best, captain and female
And good
character.
for him, and good
Yes.
for him. But it really just takes her out of herself,
Yeah.
and she's searching for a connection, and it's just her and her mom is dealing with it in her own way.
Mhm.
And she starts falling down this rabbit hole of people who are really into solving true crime
Yep.
and finds a community, but in that community, she ends up in a lot of trouble, which you find
Yes.
out like it's really like it's not a surprise. The
Yeah.
beginning of the book, you know that it's not really going to end well necessarily for
Yep.
her, that she did some stuff that she might regret. But
Yep.
please explain to us a little bit about just the inspiration for that.
Yes. This book is my first book that I've ever written. That's a roman à clef. So for anyone who doesn't know, that is a work of fiction that's loosely based on real life. And so this book, the inspiration for this book is incredibly personal, as we were kind of alluding to. When I lost my father unexpectedly and much too young, it was a few months before the news broke about the University of Idaho case, which became a really high profile case. And I had not been someone who followed true crime, who was really invested in it and watched the documentaries or anything. But for some reason, in the months after losing my father, in this grief malaise, I became obsessed myself with first the University of Idaho case, not really trying to do any of the sleuthing myself because I'm not qualified, but really just lurking in the Reddit forums and the web sleuths and watching videos on TikTok and just watching the whole world become so invested in that case. And that really started a rabbit hole for me of being really invested in other true crime. And I remember just a few months after that, in very early 2023, I was blessed to be out to dinner with a group of librarians. And a librarian across the table from me was talking about how she had set up a book club for patrons that was focused on true crime and mystery. And she said that it was wildly popular, and it started a conversation about why true crime was so popular. And everyone was throwing their guesses out and talking about how it could be both a great thing, but also pretty exploitative. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, wow, I feel like this is almost too personal for me to comment on. And then something clicked for me in that moment at that dinner at the Bonefish Grill, where I thought to myself, oh, for the first time, I'm realizing that my grief over my father is connected to why I'm so obsessed with true crime. And it's this idea that I have so many questions that will never be answered about my dad, like why it had to be him. What if we had known? Could we have prevented it? Where is he now? Just all these things that I'll never know. And that mystery was so unsustainable for me. I couldn't stand to live in a place where with that mystery, I had to solve it, I had to know. And true crime was about finding answers to questions. And I was so attracted to that. And I knew that I was going to have to write a book about that. So that was the basis for this book.
So the main characters, they come from all different places,
Yep.
and I thought that it was interesting. Number one, just, they're all different age ranges
Hmm.
and places in the country, but also just sort of their backgrounds and how they came together, and also that they refer to each other as their online handles.
Yeah.
You really do kind of take on a persona, I believe. Not that that's my jam. Solving. I do not want to solve true crime and
Yeah.
not my thing, like you said, not qualified to do it.
Yep.
But they took on these personas, and they almost became this, everybody likes that found family trope, this found
Yep.
family of misfits. But then it's like, but what are you really doing? Like, you're all talking about these people, like, them, and you want to solve their case, and you want justice for them. But is it really about that, or is it about the notoriety?
Yes.
Because that came into it too. So did you have to, I mean, as you mentioned, you became really into researching, just sort
Yeah.
of, or watching it. But did you have to do any research into people who really do try to contribute to true crime? Because I find that wild. I would imagine there would be so many issues with that, both
Yeah.
from a legal standpoint and a law enforcement standpoint.
Oh my God, I did so much research for this book, more research than I've done for any book I've ever written, because I wanted to explore everything you just said. And I wanted to know at the heart of this was like, I kind of have this answer for myself of why I'm drawn to true crime, but why are other people? And what is it, is it exploitative only to form these parasocial relationships with victims and their families, because that's what you're doing essentially. Like, let's not put lipstick on a pig, this is what we're doing. But is that really so wrong? You can see it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, feeling empathy and connection for strangers might be one of the most beautiful things humans are capable of. And that I see that that is motivating so many people in true crime. But on the other, like you said, there's so many other motives. The desire to be the one that gets the glory, to be famous yourself, to make a name for yourself through doing this, to feel that sense of kind of power and accomplishment. All of that is part. And so part of my research was not just, reading books like Unmasked by Paul Holes, who was a former law enforcement, official who then moved kind of into private, true crime sleuthing after he retired. And so I also wanted to look at and read, research really smart thinkers who are out there writing about our obsession with true crime. And so Rachel Monroe, who wrote Savage Appetites, a nonfiction book that actually pops up a lot in This Book Will Bury Me. She wrote a book about why women in particular are drawn to true crime, and she has these different personas, just like you said, the detective, the victim, the killer, the defender, and she has these ideas of why people are attracted to true crime. And so I mean, the internet is a wild west. It is this fascinating, from a sociological and anthropological point of view, it is this fascinating place to write about because anyone can be anything. They can occupy a persona that they aren't in real life. And so, grappling with that and trying to build characters who are both, the reader can feel like they're a found family and they know these people, but then there's always that threat and that unknowability hanging over even these characters, this found family of like, you don't know if they really are who they say they are.
Yeah, I thought that that was really interesting, and each one of them I had a lot of opinions
Yeah.
on. You have the Midwestern librarian who loves her gay son.
Yes. Mistress is my favorite character. I'll just put it out there.
I loved her,
Yeah.
but then, you have Goku surprised me.
Yeah.
I had a lot of feelings about him, but I thought he was very interesting. Citizen was very interesting too.
Very
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, he was kind of a little bit more of I guess like the wild card. I don't even know if it's
Yeah.
even, like he was there, but he seemed a little bit more, together than everybody else when you really look at the picture. And then you had George Lightly,
Yes.
who
My
was
other favorite. Yeah.
my other favorite
Yeah.
character.
Mom and dad with Mistress and Lightly.
Yes,
Yep.
who I really liked too. I mean, so it was like I liked everybody in their own way, but yeah,
Yep.
no, George Lightly was really interesting too. Was he based on the gentleman you were just talking about before?
No, not on Paul Holes. He, Lightly was, I knew that I wanted kind of a surrogate father figure for Jane to find that, in this community. And so he's like all the best of what I think of as a father figure, he's the moral center of the group. But I did want him, he's so good at what he does because he comes from law enforcement. And so he has a knowledge that the other sleuths don't have, and more of a sympathy. They're very judgmental about law enforcement and police. Part of their job is to jump in where they've failed. And there's a lot of very legitimate reasons for their skepticism around law enforcement, but he has that sort of understanding of what it looks like behind the curtain in a police department. And so yeah, it was just, I wanted to bring a lot of complexity into this group. And he's just, your true sort of like genuinely good guy.
And I'm also curious, I suppose, how often did you find out that like do these groups actually help at all? Like is that
Great
purely
question.
fantasy, or do certain arms of law enforcement actually work with these people? I would imagine they could also make it very difficult to solve a case.
Oh, it's everything under the sun. And so this is why I find this moment, our current moment of true crime, so fascinating because like in a case like Gabby Petito's, for example, which is another case I became really, really invested in, her parents were asking the true crime community to help them locate Gabby and to help them solve this crime. And that's something that you saw again is that direct plea, that outreach to true crimes, to amateur sleuths in the University of Idaho case. And I predict that you're just going to see more and more of that in the future. And both victims' families and even law enforcement trying to tap the true crime community as a potential resource, even if it is, I call it in the book, a hive mind, like this thing that can be useful but is so hard to wrangle and can sometimes do things that are way outside the lines. And so in Gabby Petito's case, the sleuths really did help. They helped the police find Gabby's body. In the University of Idaho case, they did a lot of harm, sending, doxing people that they thought were suspects and just doing a really bad job in a lot of cases. So I think it's really a mixed bag, but it's not going away. And something else that I found fascinating, which is why I call the University of Idaho case a high watermark for where we are with true crime, because really, you saw it a little bit with Gabby Petito, but amateur sleuths descended in person on the town of Moscow, Idaho, where the crimes had taken place in a way that's unprecedented and that we haven't seen before. And I call it main character energy, where sleuths want to insert themselves bodily in the story in a way. And I just think we're just going to see more and more. I think that's where the trends are going.
I don't disagree with you. It just sounds like a mess.
Yes, it's gonna be like talk about a Wild West. I keep using that phrase, but I do feel like both the internet itself and true crime, which is only escalating in popularity, even as we have all of these conversations about how exploitative it can be to victims and their families, how, what we all get out of forming parasocial relationships with victims and making videos about them, and hell, writing books about them. Like I put myself on that same interrogation table. And I hope that readers see that within the book, that through Jane, I'm kind of examining my own interest in true crime and what I got out of it in a way that, the answers are varied. Some of it is dark, and some of it is, about empathy and connection. But I think those are the most interesting things to write about, are the messy things.
This is a very messy book. It is really good. It's got all of the twists and turns that I enjoy about your dark fiction. I really, like I said, I just tore through it. And I liked the sentimental parts too, because it is a book about grief and grief malaise and finding connection. And I liked how it was woven in throughout the story. It was like Jane was floating so far away into being Searcher, but every now and then she would make a positive connection with somebody who knew her father from the Star Trek fandom, or, and would bring her back into what she was trying to find, or just kind of showed her a different side to her father. So I thought that that was really nicely done too. So this is it's a twisty thriller. That's what you're looking for. It is a send up of true crime. It's really
Yep.
interesting. It's got a lot of characters that you will have feelings about. But
Yep.
it's also got a lot of heart and a lot of just understanding about the experience of loss.
Yep. It feels strange to say this about a thriller, but it's a love letter to my dad in a lot of ways. And that felt like a lot of pressure when I went into writing it. until I reminded myself that it's just one love letter. It's not the end all be all. And there's something so freeing about that. But yeah, if you have lost someone that you love, I think and I hope that you will find heart and catharsis even. It's my highest wish in this book.
Thank you so much. Check it out at your local library or your favorite indie bookstore or your Barnes and Noble, because Barnes and Noble is a bookstore too that I love and don't want to see going away.
Yes.
Check it out in all the places. And Ashley, I cannot wait to have you back next time
Thank
to talk
you.
about
I
whatever you're
can't wait.
working on.
Oh, Jessica, you are just so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Once again, this was Jessikah with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest was Ashley Winstead, and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.